In a very nutshell way, all I would say is that I'm sure that I would have experienced challenges that are different than the challenges that I've experienced as, for example, a Jew in America. Well, thank God I'm a Jew in America. This is the greatest country to Jews in the history of the world. As far as what it would be like to be a black person, I grew up with two incredible parents. I grew up in a stable household in a safe area, and I think that I understand why people would be warier of police officers, given the fact that many police officers are going to react to disproportionate crime statistics with stereotypes. I understand that. But as far as the idea that, I think the reason that David is asking the question, I don't want to question the questioner and go Newt Gingrich style, but I think that the reason that David's asking the question is because there is this idea out there that every person who is born white is born privileged. And I don't think that that is accurate, just as I don't think that every person who is born black is born into a horrible situation. I think that we're all born individuals, and if we can start seeing each other that way, we'll all be a lot better off.
I agree. Asian, all of those dynamics. So yes, I do agree with the initial definition, but I do recognize it's changing.
I fundamentally disagree with the basic definition, and I don't think it has anything to do with power. Power is a capacity. Racism is about a set of beliefs, and power is just the ability to enact those beliefs. So, in other words, you can have a racist who doesn't have the power to actually enact those beliefs, and that would be a less threatening racist, presumably, than a racist who actually has the power to use those beliefs. But, if you look at Zimbabwe, where white farmers have been thrown off their land, that's a pretty good example of black racism. If you look at a situation like you said, first of all, if you look at there was a poll, Rasmussen poll in 2013, asking Americans who they believe is racist. And according to the black community, a plurality of blacks actually thought that blacks were more racist than whites, according to the Rasmussen poll. 31% of blacks said that blacks were more racist than whites. 24% said whites were more racist than blacks. So whether the definition or not has changed, the definition of racism should be that you believe that one race or any race, because of its inherent skin color or because of ethnicity or because of by dint of birth, that you are privileged beyond other races in terms of superiority. If you believe that under any circumstances, then that, by my lights, is the definition of racism. And anything else, if you want to give black racism another name and say that it's not racism, it's just something else that's bad, then I suppose that it's some sort of linguistic difference. But the bottom line is it bad or is it good? And for my money, we might as well label it all racism because it's not exclusive to white folks.
Take us out of their comfort zone, especially when it comes to discrimination, not just on race, but also on gender, also on sexuality. I think those affirmative, deliberate steps and protections by the government is a good thing.
Well, it's competition. That's why competition is there. Really, this is why competition is there. Competition is designed to do this. If I could hire nobody but women at 77 cents on the dollar to do the exact same work as men, and everybody else were stupid enough not to hire any of the women, I'd be the richest man in America.
You feel that stomach thing too, see? Go ahead.
I love these potential worlds. It's true. I really would love to see that world go into place, but it doesn't happen.
It does, though. And according to Time Magazine 2010, in the 50 biggest cities in America, women with the exact same educational levels, time in the workforce, number of children, they earn 104% of what men do, according to Time Magazine. You're comparing apples to oranges.
Is directed at Ben and Monique, and we're going to move into income, and I'm sure we're going to revisit Baltimore and Ferguson here in a couple of minutes. But I wanted to start with this. I got an email from Pastor Wayne Perryman, and it was about a different topic, but he brought up a number of things that I wanted to share with you. According to Pew Research, the net worth of white families in 2013 was $141,000. For black families, it was $11,000, even less than the $19,000 it was in 2007. According to economist Edward Wolf of the University of New York, excluding vehicles and other durables, the median black family worth is just $1,700, while 40% of black families have zero or negative wealth. White family worth, in terms of financial worth, is 69 times more than that of black families. Given this disparity, how can you argue that racism is not a driving factor in income inequality?
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. And when you have a culture that doesn't, you know what? Explain to me. You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high. Explain, if it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.
Anybody can jump in. It's an open mic there.
I look at the Baltimore uprisings as more than just riots, right? I hate the idea when you say thugs and riots, right? White people riot as well. When y'all win Super Bowls 2 years in a row, y'all get off the hook. Don't make it seem like it's just Baltimore getting upset. So my 30-second answer is I feel the frustration of what's happening in the community, and I think it's a symptom. The uprisings are a symptom of a pressure that's been unaddressed for too long.
Ben?
I'm offended by the language of uprising applied to people who are breaking into other black people's stores and looting them. This is a lack of values. And people who are destroying private property, destroying cop cars, in an uprising against what exactly? Against the black police chief, against a mostly minority police force, against the black mayor, against the black president, against the black attorney general, against against a city council that is 9 of 15 are black and all 15 are elected Democrats. What is the uprising against? What is it seeking to achieve? I still don't see what exactly the riots are seeking to achieve. Bottom line is, this is all, it all could be boiled down to just act like a mensch. Act like a human being. Honestly, it's not useful to riot, it's not useful to break things, it's not useful to throw rocks at people. And the idea that we're supposed to sort of correlate your level of outrage.
I'm going to stick to the 30 seconds on
the
this
last
one.
sentence. The last sentence.
Yeah.
The idea that we're supposed to correlate your level of outrage with a certain level of justification. In other words, the more outraged you are and the more angry you are, the more justified you must be, is absolute nonsense. Terrible decisions.
Terrible decisions? No, they made a lot of money. I don't.
Before they went
and we bailed them out on it. No, we bailed them out. They made some bad decisions.
You're right.
We live in an age where banks are
point.
allowed to make lousy decisions and not pay for it.
I agree with you. No bailouts.
The problem.
Welcome to the Republican Party, Charles.
No.
My job as a civil rights attorney is to be able to make you see race at every given opportunity, but no, it's not present in each and every single disparity. To your second.
What are the standards? What are the standards, the difference? I mean, you said that you want people to see race in every single issue.
Where
So
it's present. Where it's present.
Okay,
so for instance, if we're
what's your
talking,
standard as to where it's present?
absolutely, what's my, take something as simple as if we're talking about a disparity, say men and women. My job would be to show what does that look like when you have women from a different group, communities of color. What does it look like when we're talking about a woman who's working or stuck in a minimum wage job, not as a starter, but for her career?
Right. No, I guess the
what does
question
that
I'm
look
asking
like?
more
And so we
specifically.
bring in the racial dynamic of
Right.
how that affects.
No, I understand that. The question that I'm asking is, when do you decide something racist has occurred?
Racist?
Yes. When can you decide that an act of racism has occurred? Because if you have just a statistical disparity, has an act of racism automatically occurred? That was David's basic question, I think.
Right. There's go back to history. So this is what I want to challenge Ben on history. On your show, Ben, you said that you believe the 1964 Civil Rights Act was flawed. How is that different from telling black Americans that they should have to continue enduring the endless indignities of racial discrimination and segregation that a war and constitutional amendment could not change?
Okay, so when I talked about the Civil Rights Act of 64, what I said was flawed about the Civil Rights Act of 64 was not 8 of the 10 titles that talk about what the government can and cannot do. What I said was flawed is the government forcing private business owners into doing things. Because Jim Crow was the government forcing private owners into doing things. Jim Crow was not an informal regime of private business owners doing things. It was actual laws on the books forcing businesses to discriminate against people. I mean, you can look up the Jim Crow laws. They were statutory. They were present in the South. The point that I was making is that it's a very dangerous precedent once you start saying that the government gets to dictate how you run your business, especially given the fact that capitalism does take care of this problem in the sense that the only color that matters under capitalism is basically green. And because the only color that matters is green, if you discriminate against someone in your business, this is why Jim Crow laws were actually imposed in the first place. If you look at the history, the reason the Jim Crow laws were enforced in the first place in the South, and they didn't take place in other parts of the country, the reason Jim Crow laws were necessary is because they tried to set up an informal regime of discrimination against blacks, and that didn't work because business owners were cheating because they wanted to get black people's money. And so what happened is that the government came in and they said, okay, no longer can you do this. And the Civil Rights Act, instead of saying, okay, get rid of the Jim Crow laws, which of course is totally appropriate, and those were unconstitutional to begin with under the 14th Amendment, instead of just doing that, the government went to the extreme of, now we are going to dictate what you do with your business. Now, I may very well agree that people, and I do agree, in fact, that people who discriminate against black folks in their business are evil and wrong and nasty and deserve to be boycotted and put out of business. I agree with all of that. I just don't agree with the fundamental principle that the government gets to tell you what you can and cannot do with your business for the same reason that I think there's freedom of association. I think black historical colleges should be allowed to be black historical colleges if they want to be, and they shouldn't be forced to admit white people if they don't want to.
The notion of whether or not government went too far, intruded the private rights of a business by stating the do's and don'ts as far as the discrimination practices. Your
Right.
argument is that that went too far.
Yes, my
A
argument
private
is that,
right.
yes, that private businesses should be able to run how private businesses want to run because that's called freedom of association.
The idea and the spirit under the law,
Is something with which I agree, which is that it is bad to discriminate against people. I just don't think that it's the government's job to enforce against freedom of
those
association.
basic. And that's,
so during
oh,
World
now
War-
you want to jump in.
No,
I gave
sorry,
you the
sorry,
opportunity.
sorry.
Go
So
ahead.
during World War II, somebody wanted to sell arms to the Germans. That was cool, right?
That's a national security threat and was illegal for a reason. That's not freedom of
Oh,
association.
so
once you're-
now we have qualifications. Okay.
No. No, it's called an externality to a relationship. There are no externalities to a relationship where you come into my business and I say I'm not serving you. It's you and me, and a consensual transaction has not taken place. If I sell you a nuclear weapon, there are probably going to be ramifications to me selling you a nuclear weapon. So, in other words, Janice Rogers Brown is a judge on the D.C. Circuit who's black. The point that I'm making is that it's odd to consider that all black people have the same experience. It's not accurate, meaning that if you're talking about mirroring the experiences of kids in the classroom so that you can identify what's special about these kids, presumably the criteria should not be the color of their skin, but the character of their experience.